Hey guys, Melvin here. Welcome to the attic. We're going to be reading a story from the RPG Horror Stories subreddit. This one was posted by a user that chose to remain anonymous. To be honest, it's probably one of the most infuriating stories I've read. In this story, OP is playing in a Vampire the Masquerade game. The game seems to be going fine at first, but during one session, OP deals with some very unnecessary conflict, resulting in a serious insult. Let's check it out. Okay, so this happened about 10 years ago in a game of Vampire the Masquerade Revised Edition. I'd already been playing and GMing the game for about 10 years, so I had a lot of experience myself and knew everyone in this group. Some of this will be paraphrasing because I can't remember the exact words that were said, but the meaning is the same. I'll never forget a room full of nerds jeering and laughing at me, like the very high school bullies they always complained about. GM on the whole was pretty good, but this was their first time running a Sabbat game, and I felt they made a bunch of mistakes, and I advised them of this beforehand. Number 1. They allowed the players to each pick a different path of enlightenment for their characters. This resulted in a group of 7 PCs with at least half being on conflicting paths. Number 2. They allowed non-Sabbat paths, in particular the Path of Blood, which is outright heresy in the Sabbat because it elevates mortals and worships an antediluvian. These 2 mistakes were the cause of what eventually snowballed into a horror story, but they themselves are not the real horror story. So the basic premise of the plot is that we were a Sabbat pack tasked with scouting out an Anarch stronghold and probing it for weaknesses prior to a Sabbat siege. Since the Anarchs were known for being welcoming to outsiders, they'd have no issues with the Sabbat. The city was in Australia and was very remote. I had the bright idea of smuggling us into the country as corpses and then taking over the funeral parlor when we arrived. This plan goes off without a hitch. The Ductus then tells us to split up and scout out these different places. We all agree. I get paired up with the idiotic heretical Assamite sorcerer on the Path of Blood. This guy, of course, does not want to do the Sabbat stuff we were told to do by the Ductus, because it's against his path. I point out it's heresy and say that I will drive us to where we were told to go by the Ductus. However, because I have no dots in drive, the storyteller says that I can't drive the vehicle to get us anywhere, and instead the heretic has to drive. Okay, fine, I think to myself. I don't want to mess up the game. Plus, I can collect evidence of heresy and report back to the Ductus like a good Sabbat K-Knight. So we go and do his silly heretic side quest and report back to the Ductus. The Ductus, who is another PC, is understandably a bit butthurt that his orders were disobeyed. However, he doesn't seem to give 2 craps about all the Path of Blood heresy that I mentioned sorcerers saying and doing, despite the fact that Ductus is on Path of Cain. 2 directly opposed paths. So Ductus decides that the most important thing to do is be butthurt about his orders being disobeyed. He doesn't seem to think it's important to investigate the heresy in any way, or work with the Cainite that's actually helping the region of the Path of Cain here. Me. Instead, he uses his early riser merit and his use of quietus, because of course he was another Assamite, to hook me and Heretic up to car batteries and electroshock our nipples. Not only was this kinda creepy in itself, but it was pretty unreasonable given that I did the work of a good Sabbat agent and exposed the heretic. Oh, and did I mention that I was an initiate on the Path of Cain as well? So we were supposed to be allies. Well, it seemed like I was the only one trying to actually further the interests of the Nodists. Oddly, that's not where Ductus' priorities laid. Apparently, I was instead supposed to follow his orders to the letter and walk through the desert on my own, likely dying to the claws of lupines or to the rays of the sun, rather than taking the far more sensible course of action of getting in our only vehicle and spying on the heretic sorcerer, who could well be trying to bring the Sabbat down from within. I spoke to Storyteller after the session and aired my concerns both in and out of character, but Storyteller didn't want to intervene and just wanted to see how things played out. Storyteller was just very non-committal in all responses despite my concerns. I said that if we can't discuss this out of character, then it may end up causing major problems to the group, but I wasn't really listened to. I should probably point out at this juncture that Ductus was Storyteller's partner. Maybe that was why. I don't know. They're both very reasonable most of the time, but this time I felt I was being shut down right from the start, where I first aired my concerns about conflicting paths causing in-character conflicts between pack members. Anyway, after all the weird pseudo-sexual nipple torture, Sorcerer and myself are both low on blood from having to heal all the damage. I go hunting like a normal Sabbat vampire. No problems. Sorcerer reasons that his path only allows him to take blood from willing humans unless he embraces them and inducts them on the path of Hakim. He decides that the best idea is to embrace the ghouls who we need to run the funeral parlor during the day. In the Sabbat, ghouls are effectively property with no rights, and the ghouls in this case were mine by right, since the funeral parlor thing was my idea. So when my character comes back from hunting, the storyteller decides that this is a frenzy level insult. This, coupled with a new vampire low on blood, results in a cascade of frenzies. I frenzy on Sorcerer and deal some aggravated damage. The rest of the pack pulls me off and is dealing with my frenzy, run by the storyteller. Sorcerer heals the ag and is low on blood. His new child's hunger frenzies at the sight of blood and starts feeding on him whilst the rest of the pack is holding me down. Bear in mind that I am not in control of my character at this point. New child ends up diablerizing Sorcerer. When the dust settles, Ductus decides that this is all my fault for no apparent reason, and hints that he plans to have me excommunicated for murder of a Sabbat member, which doesn't make any sense as I had nothing to do with the diablerie and can't control my frenzy past a certain point on an instinct path. Seeing my only chance at survival, I ask the storyteller if I can roll performance to fake a frenzy on Ductus. I roll spectacularly well, and everyone else rolls terribly. I bite Ductus for a bunch of aggravated damage, though specifically not enough to kill him, as that wasn't my intention. The rest of the pack breaks it up. And when I finish my frenzy, I challenge Ductus to monomancy for leadership of the pack. I can choose the time and place as the challenger. I choose tomorrow at dusk. Since Ductus is on 5 ag and low blood, that'll give me a significant advantage. This was not my ideal option, but since Ductus was planning to have me killed for a bunch of shit that wasn't my fault, either in character or out of character, I didn't see any other choice. I had to think fast. Ductus says that he's going to go and hunt to prepare for the monomancy tomorrow. I say that I'm prepared to carry out Ductus's orders that Sorcerer ruined. I ask City Gangrel to come with me for backup, and to drive the damn vehicle because derp, and he agrees. I know City Gangrel has a low vaudlery rating to Ductus and a high rating to me, which is why I asked him. He's also not supposed to get involved in politics according to the ethics of his path, so seemed like a safe bet. We drive out to the location and perform the mission to the letter. We are efficient Sabbat members and we get the info the pack needs. Turns out when you don't have conflicting paths, things go pretty well. We tell the storyteller we're returning to the vehicle to drive back to the pack. The storyteller ends the session and says we'll be taking a 2-week break. I can't remember why we had the break, but I do remember having to leave early because I had to meet my girlfriend after the session. I was therefore the first to leave at the end, whilst everyone else remained for the post-session social chat, etc. So fast forward to 2 weeks' time, we all arrive at Storyteller's house and sit down to play. Storyteller turns to me and says, "You take 9 levels of damage and die." Everyone laughs at me. This is a joke, right? No. Everyone laughs again. Why do I take the damage? Is there anything I can do? No. Gangrel attacked and killed you after you left the session 2 weeks ago. We did all the rolls while you were away. Gangrel rolled really well, so we don't think it would be fair to let you roll now. Everyone laughs again. But I wasn't even there. Why did he do it? I decided that you were a danger to the pack. How exactly? Because people around you die. Everyone laughs again. People die around all of us. We're Sabbat. Besides, I'm not the one who killed pack members, nor am I a proven heretic who openly espouses heretical views. Also, you've got a really high vaudlery rating to me. It doesn't make sense. Well, I spent willpower to ignore all that. Everyone laughs. Once more, me, stunned silence before turning to Storyteller. If you were going to kill my character off without me even being here, then the least you could have done was told me 2 weeks ago, so I could have emotionally prepared for this, made a new character, or even just decided that I didn't want to play in the game anymore. There was an awkward silence that hangs in the room for several seconds before the Storyteller says, "Make a new character," and everyone laughs again. So it turns out that after I'd left to meet my girlfriend at the end of the last session, certain members of the group conspired to kill my character and convince the rest of the group that not only should it be done despite no reasonable in-character justification, that it should be done without me even being there. The best justification they could give was, because it was hilarious. LOL. Anyway, I learned a lot of lessons from that. How to manage the potential for group conflict by ensuring the PC's goals and motivations align rather than conflict, giving grace periods for character death, properly listening to the concerns of my players, and knowing when to leave a group before things get to this level. I gotta admit that I'm a forgiving person and I still speak to Storyteller and Ductus as friends, and Storyteller eventually did admit that they made a mistake. However, I never gamed with that group again. I think I was pretty restrained not to completely lose my shit. I was so absolutely shocked by the whole thing that I didn't really know how to react. How do you think you'd have felt or reacted in that situation? I don't think I was exaggerating when I described the story as infuriating. Based on how OP tells it, it sounds like they were playing their character according to the lore and their rank in the Sabbat sect. They then applied creative solutions within their means to get the upper hand when backed into a corner. From what I understand of Vampire, there can be a tendency for player conflicts to devolve into PvP, which is funny in itself since Vampire is often described as an atmospheric brooding game about embodying the mood of being a vampire. It turns out that when you get a bunch of players together, they're going to want to use all the flashy powers. And if the only people they can really use those powers on is each other, then they're going to do that. Never underestimate the allure of a potent power fantasy. Or for people not to want to use all the shiny toys you include in a system. This actually reminded me of a concept I had for making powers work better in a modern system, essentially making powers function as curses. They're powerful and tempting to use, however using them then results in an equal negative reaction. Anyways, back to the story. The fact that the rest of the group then conspired to kill OP's character off screen without even letting them know for 2 whole weeks, it's just plain bullying. It sounds like they planned it out to deal maximum hurt, which comes across with how gleeful they all were to tell OP what happened. Storyteller and the other players' matter-of-fact delivery punctuated by the others laughing between every sentence. That kind of behavior just doesn't create a healthy group dynamic, and unnecessarily hurts the feelings of a real-life human being because you're too fragile to handle that person possibly outsmarting your paper-thin vampire, which is also very aggravating because OP's plan to usurp the Ductus in charge by setting up that power play could have made for a really cool story and character moment. When I know of the brutal infighting and paranoia of the Sabbat, that scenario would have also been true to form. Instead, it seemed like the others just slapped it down in the most annoying way possible, being completely trivial, petty, and anticlimactic. OP made a good call quitting this group, and I hope they're still playing and having a lot more fun with a better one. Alright everyone, that's it for tonight. Thank you for joining me here in the attic. Please give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Take care of yourselves out there. This is Melvin, in the attic, signing out.